Look at this photograph. 25 children smiling at the camera, their faces bright with summer excitement. This was taken at Camp Blackwood in July 1984. Study their expressions carefully. Count the faces if you want. 25 kids went to that camp. Only 10 came back home. This single photograph holds the key to understanding what really happened during those final, terrifying days at Camp Blackwood. The boy in the front row, third from the left, is David Chen. He was 12 years old when this picture was taken. Today, he's in his late 40s, and for most of his life he tried to forget that summer. He built a normal life, got married, had kids of his own. But 3 months ago, while cleaning out his mother's attic after her funeral, David found this photograph tucked inside an old shoebox. The moment he saw those faces, memories he had buried for decades came flooding back. Not clear memories, but fragments, sounds in the darkness, running through trees, screaming that wouldn't stop. The official story was simple. On the last day of camp, the bus carrying the children home crashed on a mountain road. 15 children died instantly. The 10 survivors, including David, were supposedly thrown clear of the wreckage. They were told they were lucky to be alive. David believed this story for 40 years, but looking at the photograph, touching the faces of friends he lost, something didn't feel right. His memories weren't of a bus crash. They were of the camp itself, of that final night, of something that happened before they ever got on that bus. David pulled up the old newspaper articles online. The headlines from August 1984 were dramatic. Camp Blackwood bus tragedy claims 15 young lives. Community mourns lost children. Safety questions raised after fatal crash. But as David read through the coverage, he noticed something strange. The articles were vague. There were no quotes from witnesses who saw the crash, no detailed accident reports, no photographs of the wreckage. For such a massive tragedy involving children, the media coverage was surprisingly thin. This was the first sign that something was wrong. David decided to track down the other survivors. Using social media and public records, he found 7 of the 9 others. Most didn't respond to his messages. 3 explicitly told him never to contact them again. But 2 agreed to talk. Sarah Martinez, now living in Oregon, and Michael Thompson from Texas. Both were nervous about speaking even after all these years. Sarah spoke first, her voice shaking over the video call. She didn't remember a bus crash either. What she remembered was the midnight game. It was supposed to be a camp tradition, she said. On the final night, the head counselor, a man named Elias, gathered all the children after lights out. He told them they were going to play a special game in the woods, a test of courage. The children were excited at first. Sneaking out at night felt like an adventure. Michael's memories aligned with Sarah's. He remembered Elias, too. The man was charismatic, the kind of counselor all the kids wanted to impress. Michael remembered following Elias and the other counselors deep into the forest surrounding Camp Blackwood. The woods were darker than anything he had experienced. The flashlights the counselors carried seemed to barely cut through the blackness. Then, at some point, the counselors disappeared. The children were alone. Both Sarah and Michael's memories became fragmented after that. They remembered panic, children crying, running in different directions, getting lost, the sound of something moving through the trees. They remembered being found the next morning by people in uniform. They were told there had been an accident, a terrible bus crash. Their friends were gone. They were lucky to be alive. For 40 years, they believed it. David's investigation intensified. He researched Camp Blackwood itself. The camp had only operated for 3 years, from 1982 to 1984. After the incident, it closed permanently. The land was sold to a logging company. Today, nothing remains of the camp except concrete foundations hidden in the overgrowth. David tried to find ownership records, but they were buried in a maze of shell companies and defunct corporations. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase Camp Blackwood from existence. The staff records were even more mysterious. David could find no employment records for Camp Blackwood, no tax documents, no insurance claims after the supposed accident. It was as if the camp had operated completely off the books. Most disturbing of all, he could find no trace of Elias. No last name appeared in any of the survivors' memories. No employment history, no teaching credentials. No record of anyone named Elias working at any other camp before or after 1984. The man was a ghost. David contacted the families of the children who died. Most didn't want to talk, their grief still raw after 4 decades. But one mother, Ellen Walsh, whose daughter Katie never came home, agreed to meet him. She had always doubted the official story. The authorities had been evasive, she said. The funeral was closed casket. She was never allowed to see her daughter's body. She was told it was for her own good, that the crash had been too traumatic. But a mother knows when something is wrong. Ellen gave David a name, Deputy Marcus Reed. He had been the young officer who came to notify her of Katie's death. Unlike the other officials, he had seemed genuinely disturbed. His hands shook as he delivered the news. He told her he was sorry, over and over. Not just sorry for her loss, but sorry in a way that suggested guilt. She had tried to contact him years later, but he had left the police force and disappeared. David tracked down Marcus Reed. He was living alone in a small town in Montana, working as a mechanic. When David called, identifying himself as a Camp Blackwood survivor, there was a long silence on the line. Then Marcus said 4 words that changed everything. There was no crash. They met in person a week later. Marcus was in his 60s now, his face weathered by years of carrying a terrible secret. He had been 23 in 1984, a rookie deputy in his second month on the job. On the morning of August 2nd, he was called to a scene in the woods near Camp Blackwood. Not a crash site on a mountain road. The woods themselves. What he found there haunted him for the rest of his life. Children scattered throughout the forest. Some had died from exposure, others from falls in the darkness. A few showed signs of panic so severe they had literally run themselves to death. The survivors were found in various states of shock and delirium. They had been in the woods all night, abandoned and terrified. The senior officers arrived shortly after. Men Marcus had never seen before, wearing suits instead of uniforms. They took control of the scene immediately. The bodies were removed quickly and quietly. The survivors were taken away in unmarked vehicles. Marcus was told a story would be constructed. A bus crash. Tragic, but explainable. He was ordered to falsify his report. When he protested, he was reminded that he had a young wife and a baby on the way. The message was clear. But Marcus had kept something. Before the men in suits arrived, he had found a journal near one of the bodies. It belonged to a junior counselor named Amy Brennan. He hid it, sensing its importance. He gave it to David now, 40 years later, hoping it might finally bring the truth to light. The journal was devastating to read. Amy had been a college student, recruited for what she was told was an exclusive summer camp position. The pay was extraordinary, 5 times what other camps offered. She was told Camp Blackwood was special, funded by a private educational foundation interested in childhood development. It wasn't until she arrived that she learned the truth. Camp Blackwood was an experiment. The foundation was actually a group of radical academics studying fear responses and survival instincts in children. The camp activities were designed to create controlled stress situations. The children were constantly observed and their reactions documented. Elias wasn't a real counselor. He was the lead researcher, a psychologist whose controversial theories had gotten him expelled from mainstream academia. The midnight game was meant to be the culmination of the experiment. The children would be led into the woods and abandoned with cryptic clues and conflicting instructions. The researchers would observe from hidden positions, documenting how the children responded to fear and isolation. It was supposed to last 3 hours, just long enough to gather data before the children were retrieved. But something went wrong. Amy's journal entries became increasingly frantic. The children scattered faster than anticipated. The tracking devices they had been given malfunctioned. The woods were larger and more dangerous than the researchers had mapped. By the time they realized they had lost control, it was too late. Children were dying in the darkness, victims of an experiment that had spiraled into tragedy. The final entry was written the morning after, as Amy waited to be interviewed by the authorities. She wrote about the cover-up already being planned. The bus that was supposed to take the children home would be driven to a ravine and crash deliberately. The bodies would be placed inside. The survivors would be told a story and threatened into silence. The camp would be erased. Everyone involved would disappear. The experiment would be buried along with its victims. Amy Brennan herself vanished after that night. David searched for her but found only a death certificate from 1985. Suicide, it claimed. Another loose end tied up. David sat with this information for days, overwhelmed by its implications. 15 children had died not in an accident, but as victims of a monstrous experiment. Their families had been lied to for 40 years. The survivors had been gaslit into believing a false version of their own trauma, and those responsible had never faced justice. Working with Sarah and Michael, David reached out to the other survivors again. This time, armed with the truth, more agreed to talk. Their suppressed memories aligned with the journal's account. They remembered being divided into groups, being given strange tasks, being told it was a game, but sensing something sinister. They remembered the counselors watching from the shadows, taking notes even as children screamed for help. One survivor, Jennifer Park, remembered Elias clearly. On that final night, as chaos erupted around them, she had seen him standing perfectly still, observing the panic with scientific detachment. He was recording everything on a handheld device, narrating observations as if the terrified children were lab rats. When Jennifer begged him for help, he simply told her to keep running. It was part of the game. David compiled everything into a comprehensive document: the journal, the testimonies, Marcus Reed's confession, the evidence of the cover-up. He sent it to journalists at major newspapers. Most ignored him, possibly warned off by the same forces that had maintained the cover-up for decades. But one investigative reporter, someone with a reputation for exposing old conspiracies, took interest. The investigation is ongoing as of today. David continues to gather evidence and testimonies. He has filed Freedom of Information requests, though most have been denied or returned with heavily redacted documents. The foundation that funded Camp Blackwood has been traced to a defunct think tank with connections to Cold War-era psychological operations. The threads lead deeper than anyone initially imagined. Elias remains a mystery. Despite extensive searching, no one has been able to discover his real identity or current whereabouts. Some survivors believe he's dead. Others think he continued his experiments elsewhere under a different name. The truth may never be known. What is known is this. In the summer of 1984, 25 children were subjected to an illegal psychological experiment that resulted in 15 deaths. The survivors were traumatized and gaslit. The families were lied to. A massive cover-up was orchestrated to hide the truth. And for 40 years, it worked. David Chen keeps the photograph on his desk now. He looks at it every day, at the faces of friends whose lives were cut short by adults who saw them as test subjects rather than children. He's determined to get justice for them, even if it takes the rest of his life. The 10 survivors are united now in their quest for truth. They've formed a support group, helping each other process memories they were forced to suppress for decades. The Camp Blackwood case raises disturbing questions about what other experiments might have been conducted and covered up. How many other Camp Blackwoods were there? How many other children were victims of those who believed scientific knowledge was worth more than young lives? These questions may never be fully answered, but David and the other survivors are ensuring that at least one dark secret is finally brought into the light. The photograph from 1984 is no longer just a memento of a summer camp. It's evidence of a crime. It's a memorial to 15 children who deserved better. And it's a reminder that sometimes the most innocent images hide the darkest truths. Those 25 smiling faces captured a moment before everything went wrong, before the midnight game, before the experiment, before the cover-up that lasted 4 decades. If you found this story disturbing, you're not alone. The Camp Blackwood incident represents one of the darkest chapters in hidden American history. David Chen and the other survivors are still fighting for official recognition of what really happened that night. They're working to have the case reopened and the victims properly memorialized. After 40 years of silence, they're finally telling their truth. What do you think about this case? Do you believe there are other covered-up experiments we don't know about? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story affected you, please like and subscribe to help bring more hidden histories to light. The victims of Camp Blackwood deserve to have their real story told, not the lie that was constructed to hide the terrible truth of what happened in those dark woods in 1984.